What's up? It's Marco, Sage of Soccer, and today I want to talk about a what if. What if Julian Nagelsmann came to manage the U.S. men's national team? Now, this is a complete what if. I don't think this is going to be able to happen because I don't see Nagelsmann taking this job. I think we'd have to pay him a ton, which I don't think we're going to do. And in addition, he'll have a whole host of teams trying to get him. So I don't think this is going to happen. Granted, he's not the favorite for the Chelsea job anymore, so who knows? But I think it'd be fun to talk about because I think he would be a very good manager for this team. And I think by talking about what makes him good can give us some clues in what to look for a really good manager. The best thing about Julian Nagelsmann for a national team is his tactics, and not from the perspective of how he sets his team up, but by how flexible his teams are. And I think that's the most crucial thing when you're an international manager. We had somebody in Greg Berhalter recently who I think had some good ideas, and at a club level, he could have executed them properly, but he was too nearsighted to see that it just wasn't working out at an international level where he's only with his team for a limited amount of time. Nagelsmann, on the other hand, is really flexible with his tactics. You can see that in his teams at Bayern Munich. They were changing up their style of play, their formation constantly, and too much of that can be a bit of a bad thing, but it's really good to have in a national team where you aren't able to bring in your own players and you have to work with what you have. I think that sets him up really well for success. And if we look at, in my opinion, the best international manager of this century, Vicente Del Bosque, that's how he worked out really well. Because his time at Real Madrid with the Galacticos team, he would line up typically with a two striker formation. You'd have somebody like a Fernando Morientes, a big guy up top. He was good at his hold up play. Raul was an amazing goal scorer. You'd have Zidane behind him. You'd have some good wingers on the field. You have a really good defensive destroyer in Claude Makélélé, one of the greatest players in that position ever. And you can see how he'd line up. But with Spain, it was completely different. He didn't have a destroyer like Makélélé. He didn't have like those dynamic wingers, and he could have tried to force it through. He could have put Fernando Llorente up front. He could have had Jesus Navas as a winger, but he decided to take his team, take what his strengths were in that midfield, and build around that midfield. Sure, he still had David Villa up top, Fernando Torres when he was in really good form, but all in all, that team was built around having that really good midfield of Xavi, Iniesta, Sergio Busquets, Xabi Alonso. Like, you know a team is really good when Xabi Alonso was struggling to keep up with the rest of your team. Like, he was able to build a squad really well, and by the 2012 Euro, they weren't even playing with the striker. They put Cesc Fabregas in that false nine role, David Silva and Iniesta a bit further forward, and he was able to change his style of play completely with the players that he had, and he was able to win championships with it. And I think that's what Nagelsmann can do with his team. He can take the players that he has and get the best out of them. He was able to do that at Hoffenheim, especially when he got them from being a team struggling for relegation to being in the Champions League. It was an amazing performance, and I think that he'd be able to do very well with the national team like that. And I think we should look for somebody who is flexible with his tactics. I think that's what you really need as a national team manager. And there are some other things I think Nagelsmann would do really well on an international level with. His man management has always been very strong. I mean, the players seem to love him. He's always just talking about how much the social aspect is good for the team. And with a team that I think has struggled somewhat with its culture, bringing in a really good man manager would really help out the team. In addition, he does speak English to the best of my knowledge. He is able to speak English, which is a concern and something that I think you do need to manage a team of primarily English speaking players. And I mean, we were able to see this at Bayern Munich. He was able to get the best out of a striker who, Choupo-Moting, I mean, he's obviously talented, but when you look at the rest of the Bayern squad, he's a step below the rest of the team. And I don't think that's controversial at all to say. So when you are able to get the best out of a striker who's a bit below the level of the rest of the team, I think that could translate well to the U.S. men's national team. Where unless we get Balogun to commit, fingers crossed. I feel like I'm mentioning that in every video now. Striker's a weak point for the team. So having a guy who's able to get goals despite that, I think that would be really helpful for us. Now, there are a couple of concerns I'd address because every manager is going to have his downsides. Obviously, it didn't work out perfectly at Bayern Munich, but I think he was fired a little bit too early. I mean, they're still probably going to win the league. They're in contention for the Champions League as well. And the squad, he didn't lose the dressing room or anything. So I think it was a bit harsh for Bayern Munich to fire him. But if they wanted to bring in Thomas Tuchel and attempt to win the Champions League, I think you can understand that. And I think Bayern will be fine no matter what. Then another thing is that he does play with positional play, which is the same way that Greg Berhalter set up the U.S. men's national team. And the criticism with Berhalter was that the team didn't have enough time together to really master that style. And I think that's just more on Berhalter being a little bit too rigid. I don't think positional play can't work at an international level. You just need to make things a little bit simpler, make sure the players aren't too just stuck in their own head, thinking of what they're trying to do too much. Allow them to play with a bit more freedom. And honestly, we saw that a little bit with Anthony Hudson, where they were still playing kind of the same system, but you were able to have Pulisic, Reyna, Aronson all play with a little bit more freedom, and I think that's ideal for this national team. And I think that's something that can work out. The main thing that I'd be worried about with the U.S. men's national team, though, is if they'd be able to play with Nagelsmann's style of play. And what I mean by that is when you're playing a high level positional play system, you kind of need the players to do that. If we look back at Pep Guardiola's Man City career, it's obviously been amazing. But that first year was a bit of a struggle. And Man City was a Champions League team. They were obviously an amazing squad. But when you looked around the team, like they really couldn't keep up with that style of play, and they kind of need an entire squad overhaul. You need a whole year to adjust to the new system, and I'm not sure if we'd be able to work really well with that. There's a lot of really tight technical play in tight spaces that Nagelsmann's system implements, and I'm not positive that our team would be able to keep up with that. And I think that's okay. Sometimes you have to change up your style of play to really get the best out of your teams, but it is a bit of an issue that we have to keep in mind because we have to understand where we are. Like if Pep Guardiola came and managed the U.S. men's national team, I don't think we'd get much better because we wouldn't really be able to play the system that he likes, which again is fine. I mentioned earlier, Javi Alonso could barely keep up in that Spain Golden Generation team. Seriously, go back and watch those games. You'll have Javi, Iniesta playing those one-touch passes so quickly. Alonso is kind of struggling in those, and he is an all-time great player. Like Liverpool, Real Madrid, even at Bayern Munich, he was doing so well for them. Like we just have to keep in mind like the players that we have, so we can get the best out of our own team. So that's one more concern that I'd have with Nagelsmann. Despite those concerns, I'd still love to have Nagelsmann in this team. I think anybody would, but he's not going to come. I mean, I think that's just about guaranteed. He's going to take a job with a Champions League team, and I think he's going to do great for them. But Nagelsmann does give us a blueprint of things to look for: good man managers, tactically flexible guys, maybe good attacking play that can really unlock the creativity of this squad. I think that's what we should be looking towards. And there have been a lot of managers fired recently. We have Graham Potter, who was fired from his Chelsea job. I think that it clearly wasn't working out there, but he did good work at Brighton. It should be said that striker was a bit of an issue at that club too, and it kind of got resolved when he left, but maybe that's just the emergence of Evan Ferguson. Then you have somebody like a Brendan Rodgers, who has done well with Leicester, overachieving with that team a bit, but then things really fell off, but maybe it could work better in an international setup. He does have a bit more of a simple style of play, and he has been flexible with his team in the past. I don't think anybody was expecting in that 2013-14 season for Sterling to be playing as a bit of a 10. He had pushed Gerrard into a deeper position. Like I think he is tactically flexible enough to help out these teams. And then a lot of other guys have been getting fired recently, so there are a lot of jobs opening up, and hopefully some of those managers will decide to take ours because I think we'd really use the help. And I think Nagelsmann gives us a good blueprint of what we should be looking for. And yeah, that's all I got to talk about. See ya.